Yeah, so welcome. And I'm here to really share the love of my life, my work, my soul work, the Alexander technique, which I've been really doing for many, many years, almost 40 years now. And I started training myself based on some pretty severe lower back pain that I had. So I find that people will come into the Alexander technique usually because they've heard about it being very helpful for pain management, for having better posture, and also for having better balance. And there's nothing like, practicing and skill building in the Alexander technique for having free, beautiful, available balance. And I love to say it's like we knew that as little children. We lived free, we moved very freely. It took us a long time, like almost a year usually, to figure out how to balance those very big heads on top of the tiny little bodies. But we all did it. We were all able to manage that, and that is no small task. If you looked at a little child trying to start learning how to walk, what they often do is they lose their balance as soon as they come to standing, and they fall back down onto their diapers, right? Onto their butts. And then they try again and they fall, and they try again and they fall. And what they're doing is actually what we're doing here. We're building the skill of finding a dynamic balance so that we can apply it to everything that we do. And I love to demystify the Alexander technique because it's really practical. It's not a technique that's out there somewhere and very esoteric. It's really how we move allows us to open our sensation and open our feeling, our ability to sense, and from there to be able to function more efficiently. And we are creatures of habit. We develop these really strange little tension habits as we go along in life. And the older we get, if we haven't addressed those habits, they're going to kind of come back to haunt us. And those are the habits of like pulling down when we walk, tightening in the ankles because we're afraid of falling, all of those telltale signs that things are not going so well. We're in the business of becoming more aware of how we're using our bodies, and therefore how we're able to change our functioning altogether. So I hope this is going to be a fun hour for you. I want to go really back to the basics of the Alexander technique. I titled this workshop The Four Principles of the Alexander Technique. Now, usually we talk about three, and those three are awareness, inhibition, and direction. And by the end of our time together, I hope that you have a little bit more practical understanding of what those three very definitive aspects of the Alexander technique are. Hi, Margie. And there's one more, and it's something that is ubiquitous throughout learning the skill of the Alexander technique, and that's what F.M. Alexander, the person that started this whole thing, I'll talk a tiny little bit about him. He called this the means whereby the end will be gained. we shorten it to the means whereby. Remember Alexander, this is a 125-year-old technique. So the language of a Shakespearean actor at the turn of the 20th century could get a little bit verbose, right? And wax eloquent. So that if you tried to read his books, you would see that, you know, he spends a lot of time trying to describe what he's wanting you to do, which in fact would happen in a very quick way. I do have one anecdotal story about Alexander. He thought everybody could learn this technique mentally, intellectually. And so, you know, he worked very hard to explain what he had gone through for himself, which was literally years of standing in front of mirrors and noticing his use. USE, his use, the way he was using his body. And he came to this very brilliant technique through a discovery he made. And the discovery he made was how we have to be able to manage the balance of the head in relationship to the rest of the body and in relationship to gravity. So he thought he could tell everybody, oh, you know, and I think he wrote his book, The Use of the Self, at that time too. And people did not get it at all. But the truth is, he didn't get it either. That's what took so long for him to realize, to see that he had to go through a process of what he called inhibition. Now, this is the second principle that we're going to talk to. Because he could see what he was doing in the mirror. He happened to throw his head back. You know, he's trying to get the voice out into the theater, out into the world. And he was throwing his head back. And it was actually compressing his throat and creating a lot of tension, both in the neck and in the shoulders. And so he was actually stopping his breathing, which is, of course, what we all do, right? We don't all have the same exact habit, but it ultimately comes to the point where our muscles are getting really tight in the back and we're not allowing the breath to come in fully. So when the breath is not coming in fully, we're not grounded. So everything kind of unravels or leads to understanding everything else when we start to investigate that. But he couldn't communicate that to people. So in this anecdotal story, one day in total frustration, he went up to the person, he said, "This is what I want you to do." And he took his massive hands. He was about my height, which is about 5'4". He took these massive hands and he placed them on this person and started, moving their heads in relationship. That's what he was trying to get. And I love to tell that story because it reminds us that this is very much a kinesthetic learning. And, we don't want to separate out the mind from the body. That's why we call it psychophysical re-education. We have to go through a process of re-educating our senses about how we can be within our own body-mind. My website is called Body Mind Balance. And how we can be with ourselves in that peaceful way where we can become more aware of how we're holding tension in our bodies and then go through this very practical process of undoing that tension. So I want to take you through a few practical things today. And I just lighted on the first principle, which is the principle of awareness. You cannot change anything if you don't become consciously aware of it. It's in there somewhere, but we are our habits. We have become, in a certain way, the result of a lifetime of tensing and holding on to ourselves. And that's what we want to change. That's what we want to become more skilled at. This is a real technique. It's a skill building technique to become aware. Now, that said, I'm going to ask you to just bring your hands together. And the reason, and maybe get a little friction there, a little heat in there. Feel those hands coming together. These are the hands you're going to have to put on yourself in a Zoom call. Because in an actual Alexander lesson, I'm right there with you. Right, Noah? I think Noah's been there with me. Yeah. So the hands-on is giving a very strong message, and the words are giving a very strong message. But because we're on Zoom, you've got your own hands that you can use to assist you. And what we're going to do is we're going to start by just very gently bringing our hands to our necks. And I like to do it so that the baby fingers like under the jaw here, under the jaw, and see it, feel the temperature, feel the contour of your neck, right? Side to side. And now we'll change and bring the hand front and back. I want you to imagine your hands being like satin, right? Very little satin cloth. So soft, so available to you. And place your baby finger, the one on the back side of your head, up on the head. It's called the nuchal ridge. It's where the occiput is. And bring your front hand just kind of underneath the jaw and give yourself a little nod. Tiny little nod here. Yeah. So, and can you make that space where the head and the neck meet even a little bit more open and light? And then just bring your hands back down to your lap and take a breath. So what we just did is give ourselves a little hands-on experience and go, oh wow, my neck, yeah, I didn't realize it felt that way. We want to give ourselves a little bit of information. We could do it anywhere. You could put your hand here on your head. Put your hands, I love to put the hands here because it's reminding us that the shoulders are widening. Maybe even give yourself a little Raggedy Ann doll movement, especially if you've been at work all day and you need to give yourself a little relaxation at the end of the day when we're off, especially if you're in front of a computer looking forward or looking down. And then let's finish with putting your hands on your lap, but bringing your hands with the palms facing the ceiling. And I'm doing that for a reason. We spend so much time on computers and putting the hands down and moving our hands this way that this is kind of an opposite thing to do. Just bring the hands upward and just place them on the thighs. And now I'm going to take you into a little sensation experiment, but I want to first ask you to notice where you are. Is anyone standing right now? Everybody's sitting. Okay. So notice where you are in the chair. Okay. Again, we're bringing that first principle in, the principle of awareness. Where am I sitting? Am I all the way back? Am I all the way forward? Or am I in the middle of my chair? And I'm asking that for a reason. Because in order to free your legs, you're either going to have to come a little forward in the chair, or it's also very useful to come all the way back and use the back of the chair. You can see for me, I always keep a kind of a firm pillow in back of my chair, and I do that for a reason, so that I don't have to come all the way back, but that I can still feel my bottom, my sitting bones. Now we have a lot of tissue around the bottom, but we want to be sitting on the sitting bones. I brought my Skelly with me. He's very old at this point. He's literally kept alive with Scotch tape and rubber bands. They don't make these anymore. So I'm trying to keep him alive, right? All right, so I'm going to show you where your sitting bones are. When you're sitting, do you see those little curvy bones on the bottom of the pelvis? That's what you want to visualize. And you see that these leg bones are free to move out from the socket. But if we curl back, go ahead and curl back for a second into pelvic tilt, you've automatically fallen back behind your sitting bones. You're sort of halfway between your sitting bones and your tailbone. We want to be able to be up on the sitting bones. That means that we're like rocking forward on those rockers a little bit. If you're all too far back. And let's experiment with how to do it wrong once again, but put your hands on your sternum, rock back, and that doesn't mean you need to go back in space even, but you can kind of slump down, and you'll see that everything crashes down, right? The shoulders fold in, everything pulls down, and look at what happened to my head. So this is what we're looking for, is to not pull that head in that position, because it's what we call back and down of the head. Remember, we have a round head, and it's getting squeezed in the muscles in the back, generally speaking. I don't want to keep you there, so come on back up. And now just bring your hands to your head one more time, and this time, I love this placement if you're really tired, because you're bringing your arms up, and it gives you like time to feel your breath coming in. And we've got that beautiful nodding that we can do with the head on the atlanto-occipital joint, much higher than, go ahead and take your hands down again, much higher than we usually body map. Most of us think that our neck ends here because the jaw is there. But the neck goes all the way up between your ears. And we want to start thinking about that when you move. Let's try the no movement too. And you can see if you think up and that you're not taking your neck with your head, you're able to differentiate what is neck, which is actually your spine, and what is head. So we're getting really close to changing the old pattern of tightening and kind of holding on, like super glue, right? We want to undo that super glue and free up the head. But now we're only freeing it up so that the head can start to float upward towards the ceiling. And a caveat for that is if you're thinking that up is this way, you're actually going in the wrong direction. So we don't want to be chin up, right? That's a real English phrase, chin up. We want the top of your head to be available to release. So we're defining where the joint is and giving yourself time to free that joint. And that's just one joint. We have a lot of little joints down along the spine, which we can talk about if we get to walking, which I would like to get to by the end of our time together. But there's 3 other extremely important joints when you're sitting, and one is at the hip joint, not the hip bone. The hip bone is your pelvis. The hip joint is lower. So see if you can body map where that joint is. You can bring your hand down so the baby finger is in the crease between where your pelvis is and where the hip joint is. And again, I'm going to give you that visual because that's where you're going, right in there. The next piece of this is that we have to go from sitting to standing, right? And what do we do as soon as we start to think about standing up? We usually do one of two things. Most people have one or two of these habits. One is that we push and throw our head back. We push our spine forward and throw our head back and then tighten the legs and get up. And that will not do in an Alexander world. What we also, the other pattern is usually a collapsing. And I call it like trying to pick up the bag of potatoes. So you collapse, kind of fall down on yourself, tighten the legs, and then drag yourself up to standing. The reason why we're learning this process and being so meticulous about it is based on our habit of either compressing and throwing the head back or over straightening and then, and pulling ourselves up, is that we've developed a habit which becomes a lifelong habit when we do that. And that's how we develop and sustain tension in the back, in the body, in the legs, wherever we are. And once we've developed that much, holding that much tension, that's when the back pain comes in. So I don't know if you were like me, but when I was a teenager, I was like loosey-goose and all over the place, and I never felt pain. I didn't play women's soccer either, but I never felt pain. I had no pain. And it wasn't until my mid-20s, after I had started studying dance the wrong way, that I started having a lot of low back pain. Now, what do I mean about the wrong way? Ballet teachers always tell you to pull up. I was forcing everything to tighten and pull up in myself. This is literally over straightening my spine. And the spine is not straight. It's curvy. See these strong lumbar bones? Those are right in the middle of you, and they're really thick. But if we think that we're straight, we're going to try to pull them back. Right? If we think our spine needs to be straight, actually, he's a very good model for an overly straight neck. This one. This is not the way your neck should be. The neck, I try to do this too. The neck should be curved this way, right? This way, and then more of a curve this way, and then a curve this way. We have a beautiful, curvy, lengthened spine. And what we're going to practice today with awareness, inhibition, and direction, which I haven't gotten into yet, we're going to be able to maintain that poise that we want for the head in relationship to the rest of the body, certainly to the rest of the spine. Okay? So the poise of the head, it means that we're not pressing back and tightening in the back, but we're not over straightening either. We're allowing that little teeter-totter to take place, and this feeling like the head is releasing up and taking the spine with it. And then if you have to get out of the chair to go over and do something, you're going to let the whole body move as one beautiful unit of length through that spine. And by the way, notice what happens in the pelvis. When I'm going out of a chair, what is the pelvis doing? Anybody? Some of you are muted.
Bending.
You're bending. The pelvis is not bending.
No, it's not very.
Tilting.
The pelvis is following the rest of the spine up and over the hip joint. If you were to bend, if you were to keep your pelvis on the chair, for example, and you bend, that's why he's in such bad shape. Just kidding. Actually, that's where it broke. This little plastic guy broke right in there. Um, it's too much bending at that joint, and it's leaving the pelvis behind. If you even got one thing out of our session today, it's that the pelvis belongs with the torso, and it gets to go along for the ride of the torso so that we don't bend at the waist. That's what I was doing. When I had a lot of bad back pain, I didn't think my pelvis was part of my torso. And so when I would be on the chair, for example, I would bend at the waist to get up. And I was always like moving. I mean, joints aren't really in the spine, are not meant to work, bending just one joint. It's the work of the body or the spine as a whole that starts to move it. So let's just do this one little experiment. Come to the front of your chair. I, we're gonna make it really easy for the body to move. So I want you to come onto one sitting bone. Take your hand along your buttocks and underneath the thigh, and just give yourself a little softening, moving that hand all the way to the knee if you can, and then come back down onto the sitting bone. And now we're going to go and do it on the other side. What we're doing is we're reminding the muscles of the legs that they're not pulling into the body. Instead, they're releasing away from the body. What is holding you up on the chair is kind of magical. It's paradoxical, actually, because we're letting the weight, just plain old physics, the weight of the bones of the body drop down into the chair, and the chair will support you. But if you're busy tightening all your muscles, you're not letting the weight be distributed down through the sitting bones and into the chair. If you do allow that to happen, then you can leave your legs alone and just give that nice message of the legs are just there, my feet are grounded. I'm thinking my leg away from my hip joint to the knee. And then if you want to lean forward a little bit and feel your shin bone, keep thinking of that weight dropping down to the foot, to the feet. And then come back up to sitting and keep that in your mind, in your mind's eye. Keep thinking that that leg is releasing downward towards the feet. Does that change anything in your sensation to do that? Does it feel like, oh, I could do that?
Can I ask a question, Susan?
Diane,
Susan, and Diane, I'm so sorry.
it's fine.
Okay, can you go back when you say that when you're sitting, so you have to kind of let go of the tension in your legs instead of tightening, just thinking of letting the chair and the ground, I mean the floor support you?
Can you do that? Is that the question?
Yeah.
Instead of, yes, that's what we're going for. There'll be a little bit of contact and a little bit of feet into the floor, but you don't need to tighten the legs in order to sit there. What's actually happening is we're letting the weight of the skeleton drop into the chair. But I didn't really finish my thought about it being paradoxical, because that's happening, but if you just give in to the weight, you'll just collapse, right? So we've also got this attention that we're giving to the head balance and the thought of going up, but it's going up from the top of the head. So there's an equal and opposite balance that's going on. You're thinking up and you're dropping down, and then you're moving. And when you're moving, you're letting the pelvis go up and over the hip joint. You're not doing anything fancy with the pelvis. You're not tightening the pelvis or keeping it on the chair. You're letting the pelvis travel. It literally travels, because the principle we're working with is the principle of direction, that the head is leading the body into length, and the pelvis is part of that torso, so it's lengthening too. It's moving where the head is telling it to move. And this gets back to Alexander's discovery. So Alexander actually discovered that all animal movement, including human movement, requires the head to lead the body in length. Now that seems like so obvious to us at this point, but it wasn't studied in animals until the early 1970s. And someone got the Nobel Prize for science by discovering that in animals 70 years after Alexander discovered it in humans. Pretty interesting. And that is what we started the class today talking about, that if you can find the poise, I'm going to call it poise, but it's really listening to and becoming aware of where that delicate balance is of the head in relationship to the spine. And then here's the rub. Every step we take, every movement we take, we disturb that balance. So if I wanted to get out of the chair, and if I got this beautiful, perfect balance sitting, as soon as I start moving, my spine has to move forward in space to go out of the chair, right? Leans forward. But if I don't continue to move my head forward and out, by the time I get up to standing, I'll be back. So what this technique is asking of us, remember I told you this is a skill building, it's very nuanced. It's very, very delicate awareness that we're doing to be able to maintain that head balance. And that the principle that we're working with is direction. That we are directing our heads forward and up to let the spine lengthen and follow. It gets a little bit more technical because we don't want to we want the head to go forward and up, but we don't want the spine to go forward and up. The spine in relationship to the head and the legs has to remain back in space. But now I'm asking you a big ask because we're moving, right? We're moving that whole spine, but in relationship to the head, it stays back. Am I making sense? It's so specific and it's so technical. And guess what we have? The ability to kinesthetically stay very aware of how we're doing the action. I just raised my own hand, it looks like. I think I'll lower my hand. There we go. Yeah, okay. So here I have had you at the front of your chair for quite a while. I want you to take a wider stance. And you can go back and forth from one sitting bone to another, and even just allow your spine to be very fluid here. Get a little bit of mid-session movement in there because we don't want to be stiff about our bodies. We're like, one Alexander teacher in our summit, Ann Johnson, called it seaweed. Pretend it's like our spines are like seaweed. And I just thought that was such a beautiful image, right? So our spines are like seaweed, but our head is very actively, engaged in that process. When I had a teacher named Judy Leibowitz. She was a very famous teacher and worked at Juilliard. And she defined the Alexander technique as our ability to maintain the poise of the head and the total lengthening of the spine in movement and at rest. Maintain the poise of the head and the total lengthening of the spine in movement and at rest. So it is so simple. And this leads me back to the second principle. It's simple in theory, but we choose to, we don't have to do anything, we choose to bring our awareness to what the habit is as the habit is starting. Okay? So you become very familiar with your habits. You become very friendly with your habits because you cannot change a habit without having awareness that it is a habit. And then we humans need a good reason, right? We need a good reason to change anything. Well, the reason to change it is more freedom, more ease, better balance, all of those things, and less pain and tension and stiffness and tension. So when I talk to people that have never studied Alexander technique, they always talk about it like a noun. Like, I have knee problems, right? Or I have back problems. And I want to say, but, but we can change them when we bring our awareness to them. And this is really, it's so exciting that we have a vehicle for change and an actual technique for change. Okay, so get moving on here. I'm going to ask you to, you have to bring your feet a little closer together in order to do the next step. I'm going to ask you to get up out of your chair. I know we're all sitting at a desk, so I would have to move a little bit away from my desk or kitty corner to my desk in order to come to standing. But I want you to come to standing and then sitting a few times, okay? Now here's my mechanical advice. There's a mechanics to moving as well as all these other things we've been talking about. And that is that you don't want your feet so far away, okay? So you may need to bring your feet a little closer to the chair. They don't need to be totally together. That's a whole other mechanical aspect that makes things harder if your feet are totally together and you're trying to get out of the chair. So we want a little space between our legs. We want to make sure that the knees stay over the toes. Don't get pulled in or pulled out, but keep directing those knees over the toes. And your feet are close enough to the chair. What we're going to do is we're going to think up, okay? So everything that we've talked about before is going to come into action. We're going to think my neck is free, to let my head rotate slightly forward and up. Forward rotation and up is one direction. To let my back lengthen and widen. And then I'm going to start moving. Okay? I'm going to just move, and you'll notice that the legs are going to want to grab and pull in, but we're going to direct those legs away and keep thinking head forward and up. Now you might feel your heels coming to the ground. You can just come up. Beautiful. Okay, we're going to do the same thing coming back down to the chair. And so what do you have to do to start to sit? You have to let your knees go forward, right? The hips are going to go back in space. The knees are going to go forward in space. And you're going to try to stay over your ankles. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then come back to the chair. Okay, now you do this on your own. Take, at your own timing. So we're pausing, we're thinking, and then we're moving. Beautiful. And then come back into the chair. Yeah. Nice. It gets addicting, right? It's like, I want to do it well. I want to do it with no tension. Congratulations. What you've been doing is something that we call the position of mechanical advantage. Some people call it POMA, position of mechanical advantage. What we decided that we weren't going to do is let the neck go with the head. We didn't want to do that. We wanted to balance the head and think up. Okay. What we also weren't willing to do is bend at this poor little waist joint over here and keep the pelvis on the floor. We wanted to let the pelvis move up and over those hip joints. And then I gave you another clue about the knees, which always saves the knees, to not let the knees buckle when you come in, but direct the knees over the toes, over the second toe especially. And what you've done is you've let your body go through this position of mechanical advantage. And Alexander named that this because all the other ways put compression along the spine and pressure into the joints. It actually puts downward pressure all the way into the hip, knee, and ankle joints. And that's generally why people start having knee pain. Sometimes it's because why they have hip pain too, but I notice it especially with knee pain because that's way too much pressure to put on the knees. And if you taught yourself this process for the purpose of keeping your knees nice and pliable and free and happy the rest of your life, that would be a good enough reason to try this, right? But there's a lot of reasons to be working in this way. So any questions or observations before we go on?
Can you review, Diane, the way that you sit? You said something to do with the knees before you sit down, please.
Do with your knees? Yeah. Okay. So let me move my monitor. Okay. So the movement, I want you to be able. Sorry about the mess over here. Those are my parents. 95 and 96, by the way. What we want to do. When I bring it out, I'm going to change my monitor actually altogether, so you can see, because this is a great question. All right. So what we've done, and when we got up, was we kept the knees over the second toes. Over the second toes. They didn't buckle, right? Or they didn't pull out. They're moving, they're like in a line moving, on a trajectory over the second toes as you're bending your hip joint. So you've got knees and hips. Can you see that? They're working together. Knees and hips. Knees are going forward in space. Hips are going back in space. Does that answer the question a little bit?
Yeah, thank you, Diane, because I think for me, it's still abstract to think that you mentioned that the pelvis is part of the torso.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I thought that when you ask us, when you were showing the skeleton, when we're going to get to what's happening to the pelvis, because that's how I was taught, you bend from the pelvis. So automatically I was like, oh yeah, so that's the pelvis, you bend it. But you say, no, we're not doing that. We're actually, bending from our
hip joints.
Yeah, hip joints, yes.
Yeah. So that was a revelation for me when I first started. I literally had a fight with my Alexander teacher in my first lesson. And she said the pelvis was part of your torso. I said, no, it's not. It's part of my legs. She goes, no, it's part of your torso. No, it's not. It's part of my legs. And it, it took me a long time to like unlock my pelvis, which was kind of locked this way. I was thinking because you have the gluteus maximus muscle, it's a leg muscle. That's the muscle we use to jump. So I just thought my legs started up here. But that's a mismapping of the joint, of where movement takes place. And inevitably, guess who had low back pain? Because I would tighten all that and then bend from the waist and keep my legs tight. So I wasn't using my leg joints when I was moving, right? And I work with a lot of older people now. Generally, they come for the lessons not because of pain, but because they want better posture and they're afraid of falling and feeling like a loss of balance. And I'm already experiencing that at my age, is feeling like sometimes I'll like not really 100% have my balance. But if you go back and give yourself your directions, you're going to be able to manage a lot more fluidity in the leg joints. So, that just leads me to the next thing, but I wanted to just open it for any other observations or questions before we go on. I'm going to take you to standing and we'll do a little work with balance next. Mm-hmm. Anybody else? Yes, Sue, go ahead.
I noticed I had my hands resting on my thighs, and I noticed that as my hips went back and I came forward, that my quads all bunched up, like my legs were pulling into my hip joints.
Yeah. So we started. I know we
Yeah,
all do
yeah.
that. But just so you know, you're
Yeah,
not
I know
alone.
they're not supposed to do that.
We're not supposed to do that. And that's why I set this up for so long, about feeling the weight traveling down into the chair. The end gaining, this principle that we're talking about, the means whereby the end will be gained, it comes in here because the mind says, oh, I better get up, right? The mind says, oh, I hear the phone ring, I better tighten. It's almost like a fight and flight response. All the musculature of the body tightens up before we do something. So we have to pause, and that's the inhibition. We have to stop long enough to redirect. Now, I do not expect us in one quick lesson to have the skill of direction, but the idea of direction is that the legs are releasing away. Now, when you're sitting, away just means out, through the knees and the knees to the wall in front of you. But as soon as we stand up, now legs away is down, right? And down is a little easier when you're standing. Down is a little easier to understand when you're standing. But it's the same thing, a leg away from the hip joint, Okay? So are you ready to do the next little piece here? So everybody, if you would just come to standing. And for this, I want you to look down at your feet to start. Okay? And just notice, is one foot further back than the other? That would be something to be aware of. And we're going to do a little standing dance. And the reason why we need to do a little standing dance is we're very often not standing over our ankles. We're not balancing over our ankle joints. We're a little bit too far forward. So that's the dance. So I want you to go a little too far forward. And then come back to what you feel is center. And then come back into your heels and notice what happens. stretch reflex is being activated. All these muscles in the front are trying to make sure you don't fall backwards. And do that a few times, forward and back. What is ideal is that we're letting the head, pelvis be right over the top of the ankle. So it's not too far back and it's not too far forward. And that will change things a little bit. Now what we're going to do is dance side to side. So I want you to think about your torso being a unit of length from the tailbone to the top of the neck and from the hip joints to the top of the front part of the neck. And we're going to just horizontally move and shift our weight onto one leg. And let's come back to center and then shift onto the other leg and back to center. Now when you're doing that, are you aware of if you're able to stay over your ankles? Because that's a tall order, but that's what we want. And then end up just right in the middle with your balance on both legs. I'm going to turn sideways because I want to show you, but I want you to put the back of your hand on your sacrum tailbone and the front of the hand very low, so the baby finger is almost at the pubic bone. So we're very close to the hip joint in the front and the tailbone in the back. Now let's just play around a little bit with movement in the pelvis. So you do have movement in the pelvis, but you don't need to move your pelvis when you're standing. What you want to do is just like when we were sitting, we want that weight to transfer into the legs. So the tailbone is back here, hip joints are in front, and we're releasing the leg away into the knee. Now go ahead and bend your knees. So I'm not going to have you bend the torso yet. We're going to just bend the knees. And you won't come down very far because we get stopped and come back up. Tailbone, hip joint, knees. Make sure your knees are staying over your toes. Now, tilt forward and let your arms drop. Nice breath in. And you're putting yourself in this really lovely position of mechanical advantage. Some people used to call it monkey. Right? You can play around with it. So we're in a position of mechanical advantage. Why? Because all of our joints are working. Our hips the hip joints release the pelvis back, the knees are bending, you're over your ankles, and you've got this beautiful spine that can flow around and have a good old time. Now just doing this action is one of my favorite exercises because it makes me breathe better, right? It just kind of frees up the breathing. Another thing that I like to do is this motion. Yeah. And what we're able to start to manage right now is that the spine has a lot of freedom and it moves very well as a unit of length. It's like a flexible rod and has a unit of length. Now just go ahead and stop that. Bring your feet a little closer together now. And we're going to slow it down. So this is actually starting to be a slow motion experience of walking. So what we want to do is we want to shift weight to one leg and then lift the other heel. And then drop that heel, shift back to center, and go to the other side and lift the heel. We're lifting the heel, but we're kind of pushing the toes into the ground. So you're getting a real use of your toes when you do that. And this is a key for good walking too, that you want to push off the ground. You know, have you ever seen a horse that stationary horse and they start prancing like that? They're just playing with their reflexes. But that's what we have when we're walking as well. Okay. And now what we're going to do is a little bit faster. So we're going to go back and forth. We want to be solidly on one leg to bend, to lift the other heel, and let the spine gently move towards that knee that's bent. And then place that leg down and go the other side. Okay, I don't expect you to get this 100% the first day, but this movement is a movement that's going to keep your ankles really working and really free and walking. And of course, when you're walking down the roads in Philadelphia, I don't know if you all live in Philadelphia, but if you walk in Philadelphia, the streets are all, jagged. So you have to look down. But you can kind of look 4 or 5 feet in front of you. And what we're doing right here is this beautiful movement called cross patterning, which if you did this on the floor, it's called creeping, but the body does this very naturally. And if you put your hands on your sternum and just do the same thing, you'll see that there's quite a bit of movement in the spine. So this is one thing that I teach in the Alexander technique, is to give yourself that freedom back. Because when we walk, we're like soldiers, right? We just hold everything together and start, pressing on like we're in the army or something. So giving, someone gave me a thumbs up on that one. And that's what we want to get back. And that is a true freedom of movement. So we're really, giving the whole body an opportunity to do this. When you take it out for a walk in your living room, you have to go a little faster because like I said, we broke it down. It's slow motion. You wouldn't want to walk like this, right? The abominable snowman. So you just bring it into more, you just have to quicken your step, and you'll see that you have a lot of confidence in your movement when you do that. So I'm looking at the time, and we're really coming to the end of our time together. But I do want to just open it up for any questions. I know we went through a lot very quickly today, and as a kind of a general intro to all these principles. So, anybody have a question?
Will we be able to access the video of this?
I'd be happy to
much good
send
stuff in
you.
it.
Yeah, if you, I think I have everyone's email address. Actually, why don't you all just put, anybody who wants a copy of the recording, just put your email in the chat, and I will save the chat. But I pretty much have everybody's email address anyway.
Hey, Diane, can I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
So, yeah, like to talk about, inhibition, awareness, because like, of course, it's not like in an hour that we're gonna know what to do and how to use our body. It's really a lot of practice and awareness combined
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
But I want to just go over with the position of the head uh, in the direction of the head, because you said that we either have a tendency to be back, and then that really create this tension in our shoulders, in our spine, in the muscles, or we going, of course, when we hunch over the computer. So really the golden spot, I guess, is
Mm-hmm.
really to get it, like to figure out where is it, and really to go like towards to release the top of your head, So it's not like to be stiff, like, you know, we're taught in dance class or whatever,
Yeah.
but rather it's like with the chin up, you said, but it's really to figure out, like to map the head, the top of a skull is directed towards
Mm-hmm.
the ceiling, the sky, really.
Yeah.
That kind of, I mean, is that like how you can like figure out like really the most like what I mean, what I'm trying to ask you, okay, in one sense, it's like what's the tip to find like this really the soft, the sweet spot where to
Yeah. It's a beautiful question. Well, the short answer is that we love to drag our necks with the head, right? We communicate so much by tightening the neck. We have no idea. Even if we reach for a doorknob, we're tightening our necks before we even get there. And that's the whole process of bringing your attention back to the body. That's what we call the means whereby. You want to like stay with yourself the whole process of getting there. But your question is even more specific, I think. It's like if you're not tightening your neck or pulling on the neck, then the neck stays as part of this spine, this beautiful spine. And the head is actually rotating slightly. Now if you're already very forward, then the rotation has to ease up a little bit so that it's right in that placement. But it's a rotation it's freeing the neck in order for the head to rotate. So the very first thing that you're doing is freeing your neck so that the head can rotate. Then think up. I like to break it down into two parts because it's so confusing to think about getting that head forward and up by just kind of going there. And this work is we have the concept of non-doing. So we're actively thinking. We're giving directional thoughts to the body, which are not doing thoughts. They're thinking thoughts. So I was a big doer. I wanted to like get there really fast and do my body because I was used to being a dancer and doing, what the teacher said, pull up, push back, to, do this, straighten your neck, all of those things. This is so different because it requires us to be in relationship to gravity and to trust that the floor is supporting us.
Mhm.
It's really powerful. All right, so now on another it feels like you were asking a very specific technical question. If you place your fingers right in front of your ear, kind of in that where the little cartilage is, that's about where the atlanto-occipital joint is. So if you bring your fingers all the way through there, that's one part. And now bring your finger to the bridge of your nose and to the nuchal ridge of your head in the back. Yeah, I got a little up when I did that. So if you bring those two lines together in the center of your head, you're getting really close to where the joint is. Now, this is really interesting developmentally. Our optic nerve goes back behind the eye, so we're actually seeing from that same place almost. And if you think about, like, why do babies start to stand, right? They stand because they want to go get the toy. They're curious, they're seeing, they crawl to get the toy, and then they figure out how to pick it up and walk away with it. So we're going through that process all the time. I mean, it's hardwired into our systems to be able to manage. And it's a lifetime of doing those habits that we have that doesn't allow that system to work naturally for itself. The good news is that you don't have to always be so conscious. You're getting a little bit of understanding each time you focus on this practice, and you get better at it. So you're really developing better habits. I don't do this anymore, right? I mean, that's a real gross habit, but I used to do that. I used to, squeeze my shoulder blades together and walk around, try to walk around the world that way. So, okay.
Thank
Does
you.
that answer it a little bit? Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much.
Anybody else? Let's all just take a breath. Nice, easy, deep breath. And I certainly have enjoyed being here with you and sharing this work. So
Thank you.
you're welcome. And, if I can be of any help going forward, I'm happy to be of help. Okay. Wait, well, I'll put my email address in the chat also. And I know it's getting late, so I'm going to wish everybody a happy evening and a relaxing evening.
Diane, can I say one more thing?
Mm-hmm.
So what I really found out tonight, something that is really new for me. I mean, I kind of heard like the book that you gave me to read about the technique is just like to really use gravity to like relax the tension that we have learned, unfortunately. And I feel that like when you told us, like just like let the floor support you, the chair support you. And it does feel different. It feels like that you're freeing something. So thank you for that. I think this is something I want to keep practicing because
So welcome. Yeah.
yes, so that's really helpful. Thank you. Thank you so much.
It's your birthright to have this relationship to movement and to gravity. Yeah, we are here to free ourselves. And there's a lot of freedom in this work. Thank you, everyone. I'll say good night.
Thank you.
Good
And
night.
Good
Thank
night.
you.
yeah, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.